Hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. We're going to follow up today on a story that we first told you about back in November, and it was concerning the use of funds or maybe misuse of funds by Idaho State University. Now, most of us have slept since then, so I expect this probably isn't fresh in your mind, but I have to share this with you because those concerns apparently were well-founded. I've got details coming up.
All reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm glad you could join us today because there's a follow-up to a story that we first talked about back in November of last year. And it's a story that, although some people would like to have seen it go away, it didn't go away. And let's just put it this way. A legislative audit has shown that where there is smoke, it looks like there was probably fire as well. Let's dive in real quick and I'll bring you up to speed for those who may not have heard about this. Back in November, there was an article published. Ron Nate, president of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, was the author of this one. What happened with ISU and Bannock County lab money? Anatomy of a malfeasance? Question, because we didn't know at that time. So the question here, and we'll explain this, comes down to a matter of Bannock County and Idaho State University, by all appearances, colluded to keep control of over $850,000 of state money, and then were using it as kind of a slush fund, even though the law specified that they had to return unspent appropriated money to the state if it wasn't used for the intended purpose that it was appropriated in the first place. Now, the Idaho legislature appropriated $900,000 for operating expenses for the East Idaho Forensic Pathology Center. That was back in 2022, and the law required that that money be expended only for lab expenses and spent before July 2023. So what happened there? Well, the lab never really was made. And IFF, along with PAGE, which is, I believe, Pocatello Accountability, I forget the full name of the group, but this is a public accountability group, along with Senator Glenneda Zuiderveld, learned that according to the records, when the original building plans for this pathology lab fell through and the deadline for expending the funds was approaching, Bannock County invoiced Idaho State University $853,700 for the forensic pathology project. And then they turned around and recorded it for accounting purposes as project costs incurred and paid the county all $853,700. Now, you still with us? So documents obtained by the Idaho Freedom Foundation and Pocatello for accountable government entities. There we go. Through public records requests show that the pathology center was never built. ISU did not spend the money, all of the money that is, but they didn't return the funds to the state either. Instead, they sent the remainder to Bannock County, and the records indicate that Bannock County didn't return that money to the state and instead was spending it like that money like it was a slush fund. So that prompted investigation efforts after Bannock County Commissioner John Crowder made some observations in a meeting, a public meeting at that time. So again, this is the end of last year, and this is when some of the big questions had come up. Careful scrutiny of the financial statements shows that there were no such costs incurred for the project by ISU or Bannock County. So what should have happened with that money? Well, it should have gone back to the state of Idaho. The law is very clear on how funds appropriated for a purpose may only be spent for that purpose and not transferred to create reserves or slush funds for officials to employ at their discretion. And this is back at the end of November. It appears officials at Bannock County and ISU circumvented the law. Now, there was follow-up that happened just about a month and a half later. This was from Rachel Hazlett, who wrote this article about how Bannock County returned the misspent funds to the state. But the question remained, is that enough? And I think you'll appreciate some of the observations she makes here. First of all, where there's smoke, there's fire. That appears to ring true regarding the misappropriation of public funds between ISU and Bannock County. And since the earlier article on that, ISU requested that Bannock County return the remaining ballots, which they now say was reimbursed to the state per the terms of the appropriation. That wasn't entirely true, though. Originally, $853,700 was transferred from ISU to Bannock County, but at the end of December, only the unspent funds totaling $684,817.68 had been returned to ISU. Okay, what happened to that other money? Well, again, it was used as kind of a slush fund, training, travel, that kind of thing, pertaining to the pathology lab, but not for the construction of the lab, which is why it was appropriated. But is simply returning the funds enough? Rachel asks. And she says, probably not. And Senator Glenneda Zuiderveld agrees. She is the one who helped bring these problems to light. She said, the people of Idaho have a right to expect more from their leaders and institutions. We must demand full restitution, accountability, and meaningful reforms to protect taxpayer dollars. And she says, I will continue to push for transparency and solutions that rebuild public trust in the management of taxpayer funds. If you remember nothing else from this video, that's the key. This is not a gotcha. This is not about, well, now we have political advantage over this person or that group. This is about making sure that those taxpayer dollars are not being misused in any way, shape, or form. After all, they represent the labor of people who went out and put in an honest day's work and had a portion of that taxed away from them by the state. Now, the Idaho Freedom Foundation, again, in this January article said, we agree with Senator Zuiderveld that there must be accountability for the misappropriation of taxpayer dollars in returning the funds. Elected officials ought to be held to a higher standard as they govern, appropriate money, and also set the tone of social and cultural trends. Accountability is primary in a republic. As Thomas Paine stated, a body of men holding themselves accountable to nobody ought not to be trusted by anybody. And back in January, Rachel wrote, ISU and Bannock County appear to be going out of their way to make this go away without any real repercussions. But the legislature, the Attorney General's office, and ordinary Idahoans would be remiss to move forward without expecting accountability and answers. Which brings us to today, well, actually yesterday. This was the headline from East Idaho News. Audit finds Idaho State University likely misused state funds for defunct pathology center. Money has since been returned. Well, that sounds, oh, then all is well, it's right and proper here. Well, let's just move on from it. Let's dig a little bit deeper, though. The legislative audit found that Idaho State University likely misused funds intended for a never-realized forensic pathology center in Pocatello, and the report found that the university appeared to pay Bannock County funds improperly in order to avoid reverting the unspent money to the state. Hello. They should have done that in the first place, so why didn't they? The issue may go to Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador for further investigation. Now, as of the time that we are broadcasting this video, we don't yet know if that is going to go to Attorney General Raul Labrador, but it's on the table. This is serious stuff. So again, this is not politics of retribution or somebody seeking advantage. This is accountability for people to whom a great deal of money has been trusted at the expense of the taxpayers, and they deserve that accountability. The Legislative Services Office released the audit report Wednesday, which was too limited in scope to conclude malfeasance, but Auditor April Renfro wrote in the audit summary, but facts may indicate misappropriation of public funds were forwarded to the state's chief litigator for further consideration. That sounds pretty serious, and it is. ISU paid an invoice for $853,700 from Bannock County that was not supported by evidence of allowable expenses and appeared to have been directed and submitted to avoid reverting unspent general funds to the state of Idaho as required. Well, once that money was in their hands, they really got to hang on to this. ISU President Robert Wagner and Chief Financial Officer Jennifer Steele responded in a letter that the university takes seriously the findings of the audit and its recommendation for use of public funds. They said, we acknowledge the concerns raised in the report and agree to continue to implement measures to ensure appropriate accountability for the financial transactions. Well, that sounds good. I guess we will see. In November 2024, the conservative think tank, you need to know they're conservative, Idaho Freedom Foundation, published an article citing public records showing the funds were never reverted back to the state. Senator Glenneda Zuiderveld of Twin Falls sent out the press release that same month, alleging that ISU misappropriated funds for the defunct project, calling for an investigation. Now, the report cited the IFF article and emails showing the university appeared concerned about ensuring appropriation was not reverted to the Idaho State General Fund by stating that we need to expend the $900,000 state appropriation to ISU by June 30th, 2023. We think the cleanest path forward is for the county to invoice us for the $900K. So let's work out a little deal here where we can make this happen. But the invoicing didn't include details on what costs were incurred that it was for as required by the bill providing the funds, which was House Bill 776. We found no evidence that ISU attempted to obtain additional documentation to support the expenditure or to recover the funds till after the media and legislature began asking questions, the report said. Well, I got to give them credit for at least responding, but they probably should have done that in the first place. So here's the summary here. ISU says, yeah, we're taking steps to address findings in the report, but the report found that the ISU employees, and I want you to see this word, interpreted the money as pass-through funds for the county. Not what the law said. It was, well, we interpreted it this way, but it was a rather self-serving way of making sure that we keep that money close to where, it can still benefit us. That was problematic because that's not how they were indicated on the legislation appropriating the money. Bannock County in late 2024 and early 2025 returned the money through 2 checks totaling $853,700 to ISU, which then sent the money back to the state treasury. The audit provided 2 recommendations to the university, and this is where you as a citizen need to think, is this enough? Do I feel like they're doing what they should do? They were to develop and follow written procedures for proper monitoring and compliance with appropriation laws and improve internal controls to ensure payments are supported by appropriate documentation and actual expenditures. Now, in February of this year, the university created what it calls an appropriations tracking and oversight team. Sorry, I have to ATOT. All right, I was going to see if the acronym was anything wild, but apparently not. It was meant to ensure state money is expended in full compliance with legislative intent and law. University leaders cited the new team in its response letter and said they had implemented new procedures. And again, good for them. I hope this is something that they're taking seriously. But there's a bigger question here, and that bigger question is, why did they step around the process in the first place? And look, I'm not suggesting somebody's got to go to jail, but if there were acts that ran afoul of the law, then somebody needs to answer for that. And I'm coming back to the idea. Do you trust your state leaders, your legislators, the people who you have elected to go and appropriate that money taken from the taxpayers? Do you trust them to do it honestly and openly? See, it's stuff like this that casts doubt on the process. And that's why this kind of whistleblowing, it may seem like, oh, it's just politics as usual, but it's really not. It's about accountability that keeps government operating within its proper scope. Because when it gets outside that scope, let's just say all kinds of mischief can ensue. And that's not good for taxpayers, nor is it good for people, even if they don't pay taxes, but still live under a system that doesn't seem inclined to follow the rules. Hey, if we have to follow the rules, government has to follow the rules. That's what makes a republic. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
All reporters are biased. The Idaho Press Club are biased. All media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not